think we can get started. I'll give a very quick introduction, then hand over. So yeah, hi everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Welcome to Lancaster West Sustainability Series. So as you can see, this is session 23 now of our sustainability series, where it's part of our wider Green Skills Academy, where we regularly get in experts to give a talk and answer any questions about a whole range of topics to do with sustainability. I'm Hannah Smith. I'm our Sustainability Programme Manager for Lancaster West Neighbourhood Team. And today we are joined by William and Sojan from the Climate Literacy Project. And they do lots of great work helping people to better understand climate change, its impacts, and all the things that we can do to help address it. So the climate literacy programme as a whole is something that we are looking at rolling out as a part of the Green Skills Academy to do some training around that for staff and residents in Kensington and Chelsea. So we thought this would be really useful as a little bit of a taster session, just to hear a bit more about the sort of thing that involves. We've got an hour altogether, so as you can see, we've got some slides to talk through, but should have some time for questions at the end as well. I'll keep an eye out on the chat, so if anybody does have any questions or thoughts throughout, feel free to put them in, or just stick your hand up and we can have a bit of a chat. And yeah, as Ruby said, it's been recorded, so hopefully that's okay with everybody. It'll also go on our website after, so if you miss some of the session, then you can watch it back. So yeah, without any further ado, I'll hand over and let you guys introduce yourselves.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hannah. That was a really nice introduction. So hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to our session where I'll be walking you through about carbon literacy for the social housing sector, and we'll give you a bit of insights. We've got a really nice agenda ready for you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, perfect. So your presenters for today, so let me introduce myself. I am Sojan Jani, and I work as the project officer for the Carbon Literacy Project. A little bit of a background, I joined back in 2022 as a placement student with the project. That was during my master's. And now I'm working full-time with a split role within the project. So I work within the housing team. I also do a bit of healthcare stuff and also a bit of certifications. Now I'm happy to pass on to my colleague Bill, who is joining along with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Sojan. And yeah, it's great to be here today. So I'm Will, and I work on our toolkits team at the project, and I also have a master's in climate change and sustainability. But back to you, Sojan.
Thank you so much, Will. So the agenda for today, it's pretty much easy. So we'll be looking into a bit of introduction and scene setting about what climate change is and everything. Then we'll be looking on what on earth is carbon literacy. And we'll be talking about the social housing toolkit, what's included, how do we take actions at home and at work. And also at the end of the session, we'll have a bit of time, hopefully, for a bit of round of Q&A. So if any questions, you can keep it at the end, or else you can always use the chat feature to ask your questions, and we're happy to answer on that as well. So a quick quiz before we get started. So so according to the IPCC, when do emissions need to peak by at the latest in order to restrict global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels? Now, everyone, you can feel free to use the chat feature. You can type in your answers. Just as you can see, there's 4 options. So it can be 2025, 2030, 2035, or 2040. I'll just give a quick minute for everyone to just type in their answers. It can be any random, so it can be a guess as well. It's not, we don't expect everyone to know it. It can be a random one. Let's see, the 2030, 2035, 2030, lots of 2030. It's good. 2030, ooh, everyone's going strong with 2030. Interesting. Okay, oh, I see a 2040 here. Okay. Not bad, not bad. Okay, so surprisingly enough, the answer is A, 2025. And yes, it is true. The emissions need to peak by 2025 to restrict global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And how many months away are we? 8 months? That's next year, just 8 months away. So yeah, surprising to know. It was surprising for me in the beginning as well, but yes, it is. Now, why do we need to act? So the statement you see on screen was from Patricia, who is the UN Climate Change Executive Secretary. But I want to draw all your attention to the image you see below of the stripes. Now, some of you might be familiar with this, or some of you might have never seen this as well. It's totally okay. So Professor Edward Hawkins from the University of Reading created these. Now, each stripe represents the average temperature for a single year relative to the average temperature between 1884 to 2020. And the band of dark red stripes that you see towards the right-hand corner of the graphic shows the rapid heating of our planet in the recent years. Now, there is a set of stripes for over 200 countries and for various different cities as well. But yeah, this set shows the UK's warming, and it highlights how climate change, how climate change is here, and we are in it right now, and we all have a part to play in it. Now, why do I and we matter? So research has shown that technological advances alone won't reduce our emission to net zero. Now, the Climate Change Committee emphasizes that nearly 60% of all the policies needed to meet the UK's sixth carbon budget requires some element or sort of behavioral change. And it highlights that every individual needs to understand the climate crisis and the role they play within it. And this is what the carbon literacy, or as a project, what we aim to do. Now, talking about the Carbon Literacy Project, now we are a low carbon culture change project that's based in Manchester, and we promote learning and doing. Now we are a non-profit charity, and we oversee the expansion of the project and carbon literacy training that's across the UK, Europe, and now internationally as well. Now we were recognized by the UN at COP21 and awarded as one of the 100 worldwide transformative action programs as well. Now, as a project or as an organization, we have come up with a definition for what carbon literacy is. So carbon literacy, it is an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community, and organizational basis. Now, the key aspects of carbon literacy training is, first of all, it's a day's worth of learning about climate change. Now, this is because there is so much to cover on the topic of climate change that anything less would not be enough to understand the significance of the action needed to address climate crisis. So when I say it's a day's worth of learning, it's about 7 to 8 hours long. Now, the learning will be relevant to the individual, which means it will be specific to the sector and mainly the organization they work in. Now, an important way of making the training more effective is the peer-to-peer aspect of delivery, and the influence and training peer-to-peer aspect has is much more significant when when the training is being delivered by peers. And at the end of the training, we do have a quality control and certification accreditation process, which I'll be talking you through in the next slide. So what's in the course? Now, all the carbon literacy courses that we have are designed based on the carbon literacy standard, and it comprises of mainly 4 elements. That is the knowledge, learning method, the values, and taking action. Now, when we cover topics of knowledge, that means all the courses we have includes the science and impacts of climate change. We look into greenhouse gases, the policies, which includes recent COPs, IPCC reports, etc. We look into carbon footprints and handprints, and also majorly we look at the role of buildings in a changing climate. For the housing sector, we look into retrofitting, embodied and logged emissions, etc. And also mainly, and in this section itself, we cover the importance of communication and positivity, because sometimes it can include a lot of doom and gloom, but this is something we can all overcome by working together. Now, in learning method, we want to make sure that all the learning is relevant and includes lots of local examples, not just global, but also local examples. And there's lots of activities and discussions to make sure that the learning is engaging and everyone can understand. Now, we also emphasize the peer-to-peer delivery, as I had mentioned earlier. Now, in terms of values, we all know that individual action is important, but also we must all work together to create a change, and this transition is essential. Now, in terms of taking action, at the end of the training, we have a section where every learner who's completed the training would need to complete an action pledge form or an evidence form. And this evidence form, it contains of mainly 3 sections. Firstly, a bit of demographics where you're given your personal details, email, etc. The second part of the second section is where the learners would need to write how do we get to net zero by 2040 or 2050, depending on your organization's net zero policy. And last but not the least, and the really important part is where every learner would need to make 2 action pledges. One is an individual action pledge, and other is a group action pledge. Now, the learners would complete this action pledge form would submit it to the trainers, and the trainers would submit it to our certification team, and we would evaluate this. And once we understand that it meets the carbon literacy standard or the learner has grasped knowledge from the training, we issue you with the certificates and you would become a carbon literate individual. Now, what will you gain from the training? So as I mentioned earlier, you understand the basics of climate change. Now, it's not as complicated. It's not something like rocket science or astrophysics, so it's not complicated. It's something really simple. It contains the basics that you need to understand what's happening so that you can make effective change. You understand how climate change impacts us now and also in the future. Now we gain knowledge of climate policy right from the global level all the way down to the local or the organization or even the town you live in. And there's lots of core benefits of climate action. We showcase examples of action that's happening within your sector and how you can take action and also how you can communicate that effectively with others. Now, this is our latest infographic. And as I'm very happy as well, but at the same time, it's a bit outdated because we have over 91,000 certified carbon literate learners at the moment. There are over 674 courses designed in over 16 sectors, and we have 9 different toolkits. Now, for me personally, the most important highlighting fact about in this infographic is the one at the bottom right corner that you can see is the 5 to 15% carbon savings per person. Now, in a survey conducted by Jacobs Engineering UK, every learner it is understood that every learner who's completed their carbon literacy training and also who are well supported by their organizations exhibit a behavioral change and carbon savings of up to 5 to 15%. Now, this on an individual basis might look like a small number, but when we look as an organization or a group of people, that's like a massive footprint that's been cut down. So that's the impact that the carbon literacy training has on people. Now, what part does the project play? So as an organization, we do not deliver any training ourselves, but we help organizations to create their own training materials and we support them to build their own courses. Or else you could always use our pre-accredited toolkit courses. Now, at the end of the training, every learner would need to complete this action pledge form or the evidence form and submit it to us for accreditation. And once you are certified, you would be issued with a carbon literacy certificate. Now, these are a few organizations we work with, and there's carbon literacy training being delivered in most of the organizations, as you can see. So there's Autotrader, BBC, NHS organizations, lots of universities and colleges, local councils, etc. Another highlighting fact we can say is we've clocked up our 7th continent, that is Antarctica, in courtesy of the British Antarctic Survey. So they delivered their training at the research station in Antarctica and on the RRS Sir David Attenborough. Now, a bit of history of how the toolkit approach began. So as I had mentioned earlier, organizations can develop their own carbon literacy course with our supporting materials, but then also the Department of Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy, that is BASE, realized that there's a huge potential to speed up the rollout of carbon literacy training within the public sector, and they offered us an initial funding to develop off-the-shelf toolkit courses that are ready to go and are easily accessible. So that's how the toolkit approach initially began. Now, as you can see, we have various different toolkits, and our first toolkit was the Local Authorities Toolkit that was launched back in 2020 October. And at the moment, we have over 260 local authorities that have delivered carbon literacy training internally or via an external trainer. Now, it is because of the success of our public sector toolkits that has led to the development of our social housing toolkit that we have right now. So that brings us to our social housing toolkit. So what's included? Within the social housing toolkit, we have two course pathways. One is the staff course and the other is a householders course. Now, the social housing staff course is aimed at employees working in a social housing environment. It can be in any position, including board members. And the householders course we have is aimed at members of the community who live in or engage with housing association, homes, or schemes. Now, just to note, all the toolkit courses that we have are designed by sector professionals and they're co-authored by us. Now, and they're heavily focused on climate action and behavioral change. And there's a very nice and easy cascade approach that's available to training, which I'll be explaining a bit more later on. Now, what is a toolkit? So in order to maximize the speed and adoption of carbon literacy within the sector, we developed the toolkit approach. Now, these are sector-specific materials, and the development of these materials include input from various representatives within the sector. So they are trial and tested. There's various pilots. It has been piloted in various organizations to make sure it has been effective and engaging. So these are sector-specific materials. The materials are adaptable, which means there are certain slides called the blue slides within the course that can where the materials can be swapped and you could add your own case study examples or sector examples to make it more relevant to your learning. A toolkit is a complete kit, and what I mean by this, it includes everything that you need to deliver carbon literacy training. And last but not the least, anyone can deliver training. And this means there's only basically two conditions to fulfill to deliver carbon literacy training. One is the person had to be certified carbon literate or attended the carbon literacy training themselves. And secondly, attended a small 1.5 hour session called the Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy session that we conduct every month regularly. And these are the only two conditions to fulfill just to start delivering training. So I did mention that we have a complete kit. So what's included within the toolkit is a slide deck. That is the PowerPoint presentation that I'll be using. We have a trainer manual. Now, this is like a comprehensive guidance document that contains and covers every topic that's included within the slide deck. It's not something that trainers can use to read out, but more like you can enhance your knowledge and understand the topics and then deliver it to your cohort of audience. There are, as I mentioned earlier, there are various activities within the training. So there's like activity packs that can be used for both in-person and online training. The certificate application forms, rollout and support rollout guidance and support documents as well is included within the toolkit. Now, this is a snapshot of how our trainer manual looks like. So as you can see, it has detailed explanation of what's included. So there's explanation about the content in the slide deck, or there are guidances of how activities needs to be conducted, etc. It's, for example, the trainer manual is always over 100 pages, so it's very detailed and comprehensive. Now, a snapshot of how an activity packs look like. So there's, for example, there's activities and discussions around what are the short-term and long-term benefits of reducing emissions, how can you influence this in your job role, etc. Another activity is about carbon map, where you can identify regions based on emissions, historical emissions, people at risk of climate change, rising sea levels, etc. And also another activity is about the core benefits of taking action against climate change. So let's say, for example, if all the homes are rated EPC C+, so how does it affect the cost of living? Would the running cost be reduced, or how is the human health benefited, etc. So there's massive emphasis on all these topics here. So that's the snapshot of our activities. And last but not the least is within the slide deck, we have these customizable slides, or the blue slides that we call. Now, trainers can edit them. They can add their own content, and any content added to the blue slides doesn't need to be submitted to us for criteria checking. And they can be, you could add your own case study examples or your organizational examples to make it more relevant to your learners. And at this point, I'm happy to hand over it to my colleague, Will, who will continue with the presentation.
Thanks so much, Sojan, for such a great whistle-stop tour of carbon literacy. So as part of the session, we're now briefly going to focus on a sort of few ideas that you could possibly think about. So this isn't content that's derived from a carbon literacy course, because all carbon literacy courses are a day's worth of learning, but it's just a little taster of some things that you might possibly want to consider if you're not already doing these things. So first of all, we're going to play a quick game called Higher or Lower. So what I'd like you to do is for each question is to write in the chat box which action you think has the biggest carbon saving. So carbon footprints do differ depending upon the different factors involved in sort of the calculations and also which carbon footprint tool you choose to use. But we're focusing here on typical instances. So first question, switching all your light bulbs to LEDs or switching to a renewable energy tariff, which do you think has the biggest carbon saving? And I'll just give you a few moments just to write in the chat. So it's switching all your light bulbs to LEDs or switching to a renewable energy tariff, which has the biggest carbon saving. I realize as I'm doing this, maybe it'd been easier to give options of A and B. If you prefer that A is the left-hand side and B is the right-hand side, that's also absolutely fine for shorthand. So far, we've got lots of people saying renewable energy tariff. Someone's saying LED light bulbs. Oh, a few more saying LED light bulbs. We're a bit split. Interesting. So the answer actually is switching to a renewable energy tariff has the biggest carbon saving. So often people think that switching to LEDs is a really significant carbon saving action. And although this does reduce your carbon footprint, actually switching to renewable energy for your household power is actually a much more significant action. So next question. So which do you think will lead to the biggest carbon saving? Insulating your home or recycling as much as possible? What does everyone think? Oh, people jumping in already with answers. Lots of people opting for insulate your home. Just give you a few more moments. So I think we're pretty unanimous that the answer is A, insulate your home. And you're absolutely correct. So insulating your home can save a lot of energy and money in the long term. So often people think that recycling is the solution to environmental issues. So recycling does save some carbon, but there are much more significant carbon saving actions that you can take in your personal lives. Just changing things slightly, for the next set of questions. So I'd now like you to share which action you think has the highest carbon footprint. So taking a 5-minute shower or sending a group email to 100 people, which action has a higher carbon footprint? This is a more of a trickier one, so be interested to hear what people think. Just give it a couple more moments. I think you're obviously, I think most people are saying A, so they're obviously experts in this, and I should have made the questions a little bit harder. Most of you are absolutely right. So the action which has the highest carbon footprint by quite a long way is taking a 5-minute shower. So next, does doing a load of laundry or watching 1 hour of TV have a higher carbon footprint? Any guesses? I think we've got A, lots of people saying A so far. Yeah, more A's coming through. And once again, most of you are absolutely correct. So doing a load of laundry has a higher carbon footprint. And the higher the washing temperature, the more energy that's being used, and the higher the carbon footprint, and also the more expensive the wash as well. And then finally, last one, 100 grams of chicken or eating 100 grams of lamb. Which do you think has the higher carbon footprint? Lots of people saying B. Yep, more people saying B. Yes, that's a good point as well, Felicity. It does depend a bit on if it's reared in the UK, if we're sort of comparing in this instance, UK against UK. I think it comes down to as well, kind of these are like typical instances. There's obviously lots of different factors involved in calculating and kind of what the different scenarios. And again, so you're absolutely right. So you're absolutely experts in this game now. So eating 100 grams of lamb, that has a higher carbon footprint. And the climate impact of lamb and beef is much higher than other meat because of the way that sheep and cows digest food. So sheep and cows produce a lot of methane, so that's a lot more potent than carbon dioxide. And in fact, food is responsible for about a quarter of most people's carbon footprint. And livestock is responsible for around 2/3 of the food sector's emissions. So actually, by reducing your intake of meat and dairy products, it's a great way to significantly reduce your carbon footprint. And finally, just a few more ideas sort of on personal action. Something to think about is, have you thought about where your money is going? So could you look into your bank or building society and see if they invest in fossil fuels? And if they do, could you find a greener option if needed? And our consumption habits are also a really key source of carbon emissions. So they normally account for around a quarter of the average person's carbon footprint. So could you reduce the amount of clothes or electronics that you buy? And when you do buy, could you make sure that you're buying the most energy efficient or sustainable option so that you're reducing emissions across the item's life cycle? Or could you even choose companies with a better environmental track record? Or could you make sure that the item that you're using lasts longer? And using public transport or walking or cycling instead of driving, that's another great way to significantly lower your carbon footprint very quickly. So now let's briefly touch on opportunities for carbon savings in the workplace. So firstly, it's really important to highlight that some people have more autonomy than others in their role, but that doesn't mean that you can't make a carbon reducing change in your workplace. So the key thing really is to think about what are the areas of influence that you do have and not those that you don't. And then focus on these areas and then take significant achievable action where you can. So for inspiration, here are just a few simple ideas. So some of these will be actions you're already doing or you're already aware of. And of course, there's always suggestions that just aren't feasible for various different reasons. So staff training to understand what actions you can take to share best practice and ideas and to help to build a low carbon culture. And also encouraging everyone on the team to calculate their carbon footprint and then take a couple of steps to reduce it and then to nominate others to do the same. So energy saving measures, including improving insulation, more efficient lighting, using low carbon heating, things like using lower flow shower heads, etc. Those are all examples of energy saving measures. Relationships with suppliers is also a great opportunity to put sustainability at the heart of procurement. So ensuring that carbon is embedded as a consideration within contracts and funding proposals. So could you communicate with suppliers what actions you're taking? But also could you find out if your suppliers are actively taking steps towards net zero? And only choose to work with companies who have a really strong environmental track record. In terms of thinking about reducing your resource use, for example, could you partner with a local repair cafe? Could you sort of engage with tenants on this topic? And staff travel and commuting is also often a big carbon hotspot to think about. Having conversations and working in partnership with stakeholders, could you engage with tenants more and empower tenants to find greener options? Could you set up a community allotment or help tenants to grow their own produce? And could you introduce climate change as a standard agenda item in meetings? Or could you arrange a session inviting people to share climate action wins and losses, or even create a resource hub for sustainability resources, or take other steps to help to further build a workplace culture where conversations around climate change and carbon are normalized. So there's also lots of great environmental networks that you could consider joining that are doing some great work. This list is very much not exhaustive. As I said, there's probably stuff from this list that you're already doing or are considering. It was just to get you guys thinking about actions at different levels. So cutting emissions that you're directly responsible for is a great starting point, but it's also really important to act as a role model and thinking about how you can inspire and empower other people, so stakeholders, tenants, other people within your sphere of influence to take action. So engaging and showcasing could be through community outreach, award programs, and through partnership working. I think something that's really important to reflect on is that you have this huge sphere of influence in your role, and it's a really key way that you can create change. So sociologists tell us that we influence at least 10,000 people, 10,000 other people in an average lifetime. So we often take cues from what our colleagues and friends talk about. So through conversations, we can join together and connect through shared issues. So one of the most powerful things that we can actually do is to talk about climate change more, how we're integrating this into our role and what else we're doing, and start to open up space for those conversations. So as part of all carbon literacy courses, all participants commit to both an individual action and a group action that will lead to a significant carbon saving. And as Soja mentioned, that's relative to their role and sphere of influence. So here are just a few of the actions that have been pledged by participants who've been trained using our social housing toolkit. But I'll just give you all a few moments just to read the pledges. Okay, I think I'll move on to the next slide now. But yeah, always happy to share more example pledges as well outside of the session. So yeah, that was very much just a few things that you can do in your personal life and at work. So I just wanted to share a few ideas to help to empower you and take action beyond this session. So firstly, understand your key emissions hotspots. So whilst low impact actions are really important fundamental behaviours, they're no longer enough to tackle the climate emergency. So we all need to focus on the high impact actions and take as many high impact actions as we can in as many areas of our lives as we can. And part of that is identifying any processes that don't account for carbon or result in carbon intensive outcomes, and then working to see where carbon can be accounted for in any processes you're responsible for. So I clicked slightly too early there, as you probably spotted. So the next one is undertake training, and this is where carbon literacy can come in. The next is tracking your carbon footprint to identify hotspots. So there's lots of great carbon footprint calculators available. And then choose actions that you'll take. So it's important not to just think about it, to focus on actions that are achievable and significant. And then really importantly, share your journey and the positive changes that you're making with colleagues and people around you. So what we do or don't do can drive wider change. So anything that you do that cuts carbon makes it more normal for others to do the same. And this can also help you to stay motivated. And finally, stay accountable and monitor and track your progress. But I just wanted to thank everyone very much for listening. Been great to be here today, and yeah, very happy to take any questions that you may have. Feel free to either drop them in the chat or raise your hand. Or just
Great.
jump in.
Thank you both for that. I think that was really interesting and gave some really good tips for everybody. I think while everyone else is thinking, I have a couple of questions that I'll jump in with first. I think the first one, so I think from the last slide, I think definitely staying accountable, like monitoring and tracking your progress and tracking your carbon footprint, I agree, are definitely really important things. Are there any ways in particular or any kind of tools or like apps or anything that you would recommend for people to use?
Yes, there's lots of great carbon footprint tools and like websites out there. So Geeky Zero is a great one. WWF carbon footprint calculator. But yeah, we can send across like a few links to kind of different tools following the sessions. I don't know, Sojan, if you've got any others that are the top of your brain.
I personally use Geeky Zero and WWF because I felt they give a clearer idea of how your carbon footprint is depending upon the actions you commit to. So there's a section where you can fill in. But yeah, we can definitely have a look if you want more options as well. So
That's great, thank you. Yeah, a few of us have used Geeky as well, which I agree is pretty helpful, like very intuitive, and got some like useful tips on there as well. So I think that I've found that useful too. See, there's one in the chat. I actually had a very quick one, and then I will let Felicity go with hers. I think, Sojan, very briefly at the start, and hopefully this wasn't just me mishearing you, you mentioned carbon handprint as well as footprint. Would you be able to tell everyone just a little bit more about what that is? Yeah, just a very quick explanation.
perfect. So carbon footprint is basically the amount of emissions related to your daily actions or the action you take. And handprint is the influence you can have that you can reduce the action, that you can reduce the carbon footprint on. So the amount of influence that you can have to reduce that carbon action. That's basically it. And it's really important in this journey that everyone during even if you're doing the training or not, to know where your footprints are and how you can effectively take action to reduce them, because climate change is here, and it's definitely, and we know it's impacting us in various different ways and showcasing that, oh, I'm here as well. So it's really important that we take actions accordingly, and how much influence as an individual and as a group that we can have over it. So that's basically it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it's nice to kind of look at it from both perspectives as well, because I think it can be very easy to just look at the very like negative side of it and be like, oh, this is negative impact, negative, but it's good to kind of have a way of looking at the like positive differences that you can make as well. I think that's useful. So we've got a question in the chat from Felicity as well, which is, have you found any specific ways to help engage people more in this and to play into their priorities? So for example, linking it in with helping people to save money.
So one of the sort of activities within the social housing toolkit, and indeed in our other toolkit courses as well, is called the co-benefits activity. So within that, there's lots of great examples of sort of action and case studies. And the sort of objective of the activity is getting participants to think about what are the other benefits of taking action. So whether that's sort of financial savings, whether there's benefits in terms of equity and community, reduce like resource use, etc., etc. The purpose of the activity is not so much really about right or wrong answers. It's just to develop a greater appreciation of the different benefits that come with climate action. We also have within the social housing toolkit, we also have a few tips on communicating climate change as well, and things to think about. And so one of the tips that we have is using stories and using personal stories, and then relating that to people's lives, values, and experiences, and really helping to inspire practical and attractive solutions. I hope that answers your question. Sojan, I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add to that.
Great, thank you. I think that was helpful. Felicity, did you have anything else to add off the back of that?
No, thank you.
Great. And then we've got a question from Ruby around what are some of the common misconceptions about carbon emissions and the best ways to debunk these?
Yeah, that's a very good question you've asked there, Ruby. I think the best way to debunk these is by going back to peer-reviewed science. And to like academic research, and all the science in the social housing toolkit is based on sort of peer-reviewed science and studies. In terms of specific misconceptions, just trying to think of specific misconceptions around carbon emissions off the top of my head. I think the beauty of the carbon literacy training is that it gives you that sort of basic understanding of which actions have a kind of low carbon saving, which actions have a higher carbon saving. So it helps to debunk some of those assumptions within the training. It's quite often interesting with some of the examples that I use in the higher or lower game. Quite often people think that recycling is quite a high impact solution, whilst it's something we really should be doing already, and there's often other like high impact actions that you can take. Sometimes people think that reducing reducing single-use paper and plastic use, again, it's something that it will cut your carbon footprint, but unless it's done at significant scale, then it doesn't particularly have a high carbon saving. Yeah, I think, yeah. Sojan, I don't know if you had any other ones that you wanted to come in with. No.
To be honest, yeah, you've covered it, and yeah, that's very well explained. Also, again, from the training, what you understand is you can really understand where your footprints are, how your actions have, how your actions actually has a higher influence or a higher carbon footprint. For example, let's say basic things that we do. For example, you've got a bank account, you save your money in it, but have you ever looked into it thinking, where does that bank invest your money? Is it like investing into more fossil fuels, or is it like a greener bank where they are like switching into renewables or etc.? Like those are the small things that we oversee, but we don't identify as well. And part of the training with the various activities that we have, we try and understand. For example, for me, when I did my training back in 2022, I had absolutely no idea what my footprint was. I'm not even joking. And for example, I used to be heavily eat like a lot of meat products, etc. And I was like, okay. And after the training, I was like, oh my god, that's mind-boggling. So there are various different things that can be easily highlighted. And also the housing toolkit has got various different aspects of retrofitting, embodied emissions, etc. So that it's a really nice way of understanding where and how where there's a maximum carbon footprint or carbon emissions there. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think that was really helpful from both of you. Again, I hope Ruby you feel like that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I was just going to ask off the back of that. So, are there any other examples you can think of things which have a surprisingly big impact in terms of reducing carbon emissions that people might either overlook or not necessarily realise how much of a big impact it can be?
It's a good question. I think an example that Sojan said is just something like switching your renewable energy, switching to tariff to renewable energy tariff is actually a really high impact action. Retrofitting also has is also a really high impact action. Switching to lower carbon forms of heating, so heating homes using heat pumps, that has quite a high carbon saving. Avoiding, people probably know about this already, but avoiding long haul return flights has a really significant impact on your carbon footprint. By avoiding that, you can really significantly lower your carbon footprint. Oh, and replacing a petrol or diesel car with like an electric vehicle, that also has a very significant carbon saving as well. Although there are other issues associated with the use of electric vehicles as well.
Great, thank you. There's a really good few examples there. All right, do we have any more questions while we've got everybody still here? Either stick your hand up if anybody else has any, or pop them in the chat.
Also happy to take questions after the session.
Thank you. Yeah.
Email addresses in the chat box as well. But yeah, I think we might have stunned everyone into silence.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to think of them on the spot. It'd be like 5 minutes after they pop into your mind. I had one last question while people are thinking, and that's what's kind of next on the agenda for Carbon Literacy Project. Obviously, there's quite a lot of achievements that you already spoke about already. So what's kind of in the future?
So in the short term, one of the next milestones is actually going to be the 100,000 learners mark. So that's something that we're anticipating on hitting actually in the next few months or so, based on our kind of current rate of growth. As we continue to expand, we're kind of working more and more internationally. So internationalization is a really key focus for us. Something that we're also working on at the minute is carbon literate localities. So it's thinking about which local area or city, like within the UK, is going to be the first to become the world's first carbon literate city, and developing a bit of a award scheme to go towards that. And we're also building a carbon literacy action network at the moment, so that everyone who has done the training has the opportunity to join a community to carry on the conversation beyond the training, to kind of share tips, kind of connect to people in their local area. So that's something that we're very excited about. Sojan, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Again, we'll kindly cover all the topics. For us, it's more about internationalization at the moment, because we are slowly expanding our reach into various different countries. Best examples I can think of, we have training happening in Australia, in the Middle East, various different countries in Europe, in America, and it's all through different trainers letting others know about how high the impact is of the training. Because when we look, it's like, oh, it's climate change, but how many of the people are aware of it? So that's the biggest question, and how it's impacting. So it's really important that everyone gets to know about this and also understand their spheres of influence within the roles they can take. So yeah, to be honest, yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, really happy.
Great. Well, lots of really impressive and very important work, and it sounds like lots more planned over the next few years as well. That sounds great. Well, yeah, unless anybody has any final questions springing to mind, I think otherwise send them over by email. As I said, we'll upload the recording to this onto the website, and I think if it's okay with you both, we'll also stick the slides on there. But yeah, once again, thank you, Will, and thank you, Sojan, for speaking to us. Hope everyone found that really interesting and useful, and thanks everybody else for joining. And have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much for inviting us to join this. It's great to be a part of this. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.